You're watching another episode of the BJJ Fightgear Lockdown Talks. My name is Micha. Thank you for watching and joining in. Today I'm talking to a special guest, a little bit different than many of our previous guests in terms of the topic that we're going to discuss. So that's going to be very interesting. If you like the channel, if you have been watching some of our previous interviews, make sure to subscribe and also hit the like button on this interview itself. My guest today is Alexander Darwin, the writer of the Combat Codes. For you who haven't read the book yet, I definitely recommend checking it out. And perhaps during this interview, you're going to get a little bit of a preview of that. So Alexander, welcome.
Thanks, Micha. I appreciate you having me on.
Great. Yeah, thank you too. What's your life like right now during lockdown? We are here in the Netherlands, and since 2 days ago, gyms have reopened and people can get back to training. But what's it like on your end?
Yeah, we're in a similar stage. I live in Boston, Massachusetts, on the East Coast. And actually, I think after this weekend, gyms, fitness facilities are supposed to reopen. But You know what? I'm not sure how they distinguish, to be honest, between a regular weightlifting gym and a grappling or martial arts studio. So I'm not quite sure how things will look until maybe after this weekend. And I prior to the lockdown, I was teaching Jiu Jitsu twice a week for the school that I teach at, Boston Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Right. And at some point, I'm hoping to get back to that. But to be honest, things are kind of up in the air right now. So I'm not sure. It's just like everything during this lockdown. There's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah. We work a lot with Fuji Sports, and
right.
and both Jimmy Pedro and Travis Stevens are also in Boston.
Yeah, they're not too far from me. I haven't trained over there, but I hear it's a good training environment there.
Yeah,
Those
of course.
Top guys.
Yeah. Well, of course, it's a big city, but I thought maybe you're close to them or you've trained with them before.
You know what? I've never personally trained with them, but I've heard some stories, especially about Travis when he was like a blue belt and a purple belt, and he lived in the area, and no one knew him at that point in the jiu-jitsu community. So I've heard stories of him coming through gyms, and they're like, "Oh, who's this blue belt?" And then like black belts get demolished. And then they're like, "Oh, Travis Stevens, he's an Olympian."
I thought that the name rang a bell already.
Right. But now everyone knows who he is, of course.
Yeah.
But is he? I don't know. Is he? Are the Olympics not happening, or the Olympics are in Tokyo this year, right?
I'm not sure what the status is right now. They were first postponing them, and
I was wondering if he's going to be in the next Judo Olympics. I wasn't sure.
I think not. I think he retired from at least from.
That's too bad. He was really fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of nuaza, a lot of grappling submissions from him. So fun to watch.
Yeah. I think he's busy also with Judo Fanatics, and of course his work at Fuji and teaching. So he probably keeps busy enough.
Right. And sorry, I'm sweating. I just told you before the interview, I just finished my workout, so I'll probably be sweating through the interview.
yeah, no problem. Well, that's actually very good. Also, what I would like to talk to you about is you're obviously the writer of the books, but I would like to know a bit more about yourself and why did you start Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Sure, yeah. I'd be glad to talk about that. So I started, I did martial arts like a lot of kids, a lot of, especially boys throughout my childhood, but nothing serious. Traditional martial arts, karate and kung fu primarily. And I had fun doing it, but I was never like that into it, just kind of as a hobby or pastime. Mm-hmm. And then I started grappling when I was in university. I went to Boston University, and there was a club. And it was led by a black belt named Dave Ginsburg. And he's been around the scene in Boston for a really long time. And it was, I had no idea what it was. It was Nogi, and this was around 2003, 2004. I had not even watched, at that point, any UFC or mixed martial arts or anything like that. So it wasn't like a lot of people, they watch Hoist Gracie and then they start grappling. For me, it was the opposite. I started grappling. I said, this is really cool. This is fun. This is kind of like, I always say, because I'm a fantasy sci-fi writer, it was kind of like magic, the ability of, especially of a black belt. And this was no-gi to, fully control me. I had no idea what I was doing. And you feel so helpless. It was like magic, like the closest thing to magic, because I grew up like super nerdy, played Dungeons and Dragons, and spent my whole childhood reading fantasy books off in the corner. So of course I'm really into like gaming when I was a kid, and gaining experience and magic. So this was like real life. Wow, what is happening here? So that was a really fun, eye-opening experience. And then actually after that, at some point, my jiu-jitsu instructor brought me to his apartment to watch. He's like, there's this thing called the UFC, and he showed me all the old fights. I remember actually he showed me Carlos. Do you know the fighter Carlos Newton? He showed me a lot of his fights. He was a Pride fighter, and he did a lot of jiu-jitsu, and he was fun to watch. So I was like, oh, this is actually something that you use. So it's kind of the reverse of that experience. So that's where I started. That was about 15, 16 years ago.
Right.
And that was all no-gi.
Yeah. And when was it that you made, when you added gi to that as well?
Yeah. So after university, I went out to, I traveled from Boston to California. I moved out to San Francisco. And I ended up living in San Francisco for like 10 years. I started training both Muay Thai kickboxing as well as some gi jiu-jitsu at a very small gym that was primarily for Muay Thai called Gym 445. It's not around anymore, but the head Muay Thai instructor was very well known. He was a guy from England. His name was Edge. His name is Edge Brown. He was super, super skilled, super well known around that area, super nice guy. So I did, for a few years, I did mainly Muay Thai with like gi jiu-jitsu maybe once, twice per week. I was more into Muay Thai. And then slowly, eventually, I started liking jiu-jitsu more. Eventually I moved, or actually that gym, the small gym closed. At that gym, by the way, I was under an instructor who was an MMA fighter. And it was pretty intense. It wasn't a gentle welcome to gi jiu-jitsu. He was really intense. He was fighting for I think it was like Strikeforce back then, or maybe WEC. And he was an intense, tough guy. So he didn't, even the white belts, he would just kick our ass. He was just no sympathy, nothing. So that was a pretty intense, and he was like, came from a wrestling background. So it was like all like wrestling practice. I remember just like, a few times, like I couldn't even make it home. Like I didn't live that far from the gym, but I could barely walk home. Like I had to stop at a restaurant and get some food or something like that.
So more like boot camp.
Oh man, it was the worst. I mean, it was good for us, but it was really, because he was training for his fights, and he would just use us. I mean, I think he had some higher level training partners. He trained with like the Diaz brothers outside of San Francisco, but he mainly just beat on us.
Yeah.
And then so I did Muay Thai a lot, and eventually my fiance and I moved out away from that area, and that gym actually closed. We moved towards the beach in San Francisco, and there was a gym there called Ocean Beach Baja Brothers, and it was run by my friend Carlos Sapon, who's a half Gracie black belt. And it was a really cool environment, very welcoming, and he's so high level. He's one of these guys who got his black belt when he became 18, trained jiu-jitsu his whole life. And he still has a school around that area. But that was like a great experience. I lived like 3 blocks from the gym, right on the beach. It's Ocean Beach, so it's not like a beach that you lay out in the sun. It's kind of like there's pretty intense surfing there, and people walk their
Okay.
dogs. So it's a nice beach to be by. So I trained there like every day. I would just walk down in the morning, early morning class, most of the time. Um, and I stayed there for a while up until purple belt. And then my wife and I moved. I think it was 8 or 9 years ago back to Boston, where our
Right.
families are from. And then I started training where I'm still training now, and I teach now, which is Boston Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and that's under Roberto Maia. Roberto pretty much started Jiu Jitsu out on the East Coast here in Boston. He, in the early '90s, he came over here, and he was like the first Brazilian Jiu Jitsu instructor out in the Boston area. So a lot of the black belts out here in Boston or in the surrounding areas are all his black belts. So he
Okay.
has a very big lineage that have come from him at this point.
Yeah, yeah. And that must have been a big inspiration for you, also writing the book, like not just the technical side of jiu-jitsu, but also the whole lineage and the people in the scene. Because maybe for the people who haven't read or listened to the book yet, maybe could you give a small summary of what the book is about? If I could I state that it's where Game of Thrones meets MMA and jiu-jitsu?
That's a good one. I haven't heard Game of Thrones. I like Game of Thrones. I've heard a lot of different things. I don't make them up. I've heard like Harry Potter goes to, instead of going to learn wizardry, he learns mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
Or a lot of people for some reason compare it to Ender's Game. I don't know if you've read Ender's Game. I think with the combat school setting, it's similar to that. But basically the premise, there's 2 books out right now called they're both combat codes. The second book came out more recently. It's called Grievar's Blood.
Right. I have them both here, by the way. You can't see them in this screen, but we have another camera set up here.
Awesome. Yeah, the premise is a world where solving problems like diplomacy between nations is done through single one-on-one unarmed combat, like mixed martial arts. So it's kind of like the UFC, but if the UFC, the fights determined resource allocation and land allocation and all that stuff between nations. And the premise was all these nations in this fictional world were at the brink of annihilation, and so they created a pact. It's a lot more complex than that, but that's kind of the basic summary.
And it's to prevent war, right?
To prevent the war.
Right.
It follows a kid who kind of has a mysterious origin, and he's a bit of a prodigy, fighting prodigy, and he has again, I don't want to give away anything. He has a bit of a mysterious past, and a lot of people try to use him for their own needs. And there's also a kind of grizzled veteran character who takes this kid under his wing, and brings him to one of the most prestigious combat schools in the world. And a lot of the book takes place in that school. It's something I always thought would be really cool. One of the reasons why I wrote the book. I've always liked fantasy sci-fi that takes place in a school setting, whether it be Ender's Game or Harry Potter. I just think that's cool. But I always thought it would be so cool if there was a school, like a university for mixed martial arts or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
Where instead of taking classes for biology and chemistry or whatever else you're studying, everything is related. You take judo and grappling 101 or kickboxing or cardio endurance, and that's what some of the classes are. And there's different levels that they have to progress through. They have to graduate for each level, and the end goal for these schools is to produce champions that they can then fight for their country. So each nation or empire has a bunch of schools that are kind of feeding into their system, their fighter system. It's kind of like minor leagues a little bit.
Yeah. And what made you start out writing these books in the first place? Was this the first book you ever, like the first one of these two? Was it the first one you ever wrote?
So I've always written quite a lot, various things, but more short stories and things like that. And I had written a few novels, but not gotten through them, which is a problem. Now, so a lot of the writers I admire, as well as what I know myself now, is you really have to, whether it's good or bad, you have to finish. Right. You have to keep writing for practice, just like training jiu-jitsu. It's practice. It's all practice, right? Yeah. Even if you don't publish, you go through an agent, you self-publish, whatever it is. I see it it's practice, it's training, getting better. That's right. You can't focus, in my opinion, you can't focus too much on, who's going to read it? What will people think? Am I going to be famous? Am I going to, any of that stuff? It distracts you from the actual goal, which is writing. People think too much for whatever they're doing, myself included. It's too easy to think about like what will happen after, like training for a competition. You think too much about like, what will my family or my friends think if I win or if I lose, or what will it be like to stand on the podium or have a medal? It's like, for most people, I think that distracts you from the actual goal, which is, training every day, or writing every day. So I used to write a lot, and I was just finally able to, get this idea down and keep going through it. And it took a while, and editing took a while. So essentially just, pushing through it and finishing.
Yeah. And that paid off really well. I think this was not just something that you finished. This also turned into something really great. What was your writing process? What did that look like for these books?
So to go back to Game of Thrones, I like a quote from George Martin, and I'm pretty sure it's George Martin. He said that most writers are either architects or gardeners. Uh-huh. And I like that a lot. And what that means is some writers, and there's a spectrum, but some writers do better when they outline. They create architecture for their world or for their story, for their narrative, and they plan it all out very well before they start writing. And then there's writers that are gardeners. They kind of plant the seed, start with an original seed, and just go with it and just write. And then
just A to Z.
See where everything falls, and then in editing, kind of try to piece together. I'm definitely a gardener. Because if I outline too much, which is a problem I had in the past, it takes away from my creative process. Like it kind of takes the energy away. I spend too much time thinking about, well, what could happen here? What's this plot hole? Because you could just go, especially when you're building a world, like world building, you can think all day, every day about what this, fantastical world is. And it kind of, for me personally, it takes away from the actual act of writing. When I start writing and I don't know what's going to happen, that is for me a better use of kind of my creative energy. So I found that's the way I write best. Now I have, like, especially for combat codes, I already know what the world is like. So that's less of an issue. But if I'm writing something brand new, like a standalone, which I am working on something standalone right now, it's definitely, I have to have kind of a seed to plant, and then I try to run with it. And then editing is a big part. For me, I didn't know this before I started writing, that editing is such a big deal. Whether it's yourself editing or someone else's editing, that's where a lot of the stuff gets put together.
Yeah. And I can totally imagine. And how much of yourself would you say is found in this book, or of your, like, what you learned from besides the technical part, but like the jiu-jitsu, what we talked about earlier, the hierarchy and the whole jiu-jitsu world, let's say, in the real world. How much of that is in the book?
So do you mean like me personally, or like how I see the world, or what
Like,
I'm interested in?
yeah, so yourself, but maybe also some real life people from the jiu-jitsu. Maybe have a representation in your book, but under a different
Yeah, in
name.
the first book, I think I did a little further in that direction, where I had some characters that were almost, um, I don't want to say doppelganger, but kind of like based a little bit on real life characters in mixed martial arts. I moved away from that a lot in the second book, because I didn't want it to be too too cliche almost, where
Hmm.
people would be too distracted. I think there was some good criticism on the first book that I took to heart, where people said, I like everything, but that person was clearly reminded me too much of this real life person. It took me out of the story.
Yeah,
I agree with them. Now looking back at it, I don't know if I would have done that, but you know what? Again, I did it. It is what it is. And
yeah,
then we're
yeah,
getting a lot more people now reading the book that don't know anything about jujitsu or martial arts. People that are more interested in like sci-fi or fantasy, and they have no idea. So it's okay. It's only the people that are like big jujitsu nerds like
right.
me that were like, I know who you're talking about. That's like John Danaher or whatever, because I had a character name that like it was a little bit like that.
Yeah,
It was
yeah, yeah.
but it's
My
spelled
colleague
differently.
also already
But I
told.
understand I take to heart a lot of the criticism, because I probably would not have done that if I did it again. And then as far as I think subconsciously the world is probably all me to some extent, but I try, as far as my own personality, I try to actively stay away from it, just because it's hard for me when I start getting in my own head. It's kind of hard to write the characters. So
Yeah,
usually I'm probably thinking about, you know, I go through a process when I'm writing a certain character. I have an idea in my head of who that character is. I'm constantly asking myself, what would they do? Almost like you're thinking about a friend. If you have let's say you have a good friend that you know fairly well, and you put them in a situation, you say, what would they do in that situation? Not like, what would I do? So that's kind of the thought process.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Did you have a lot of difficulty to translate the grappling positions and the nuances and the techniques into the book? Because you wrote it in a way that it's interesting for people that actually train, but it's also definitely interesting and understandable even for people that don't train at all. Like you say, you get a lot more sci-fi fans right now.
Right. That was kind of a process. I exactly like you said. I tried to balance. I wanted people that trained martial arts to be excited about it, and I wanted clearly it to come across that this is more realistic fighting than most fiction or TV or movies. That's another reason I wrote the book, is because I feel like in fiction, unarmed combat especially, is often portrayed kind of not very realistically. There's better stuff now. There's a lot better stuff where you see like jujitsu, you see kind of like mixed martial arts type fighting now in some movies and TV. But for the most part, it's still kind of annoying.
Yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
things. My biggest pet peeve, I say this all the time, my wife probably is like, stop saying this, because she gets super annoyed when I say it, because we're watching TV. I'll like interrupt it. Is when someone, it's like a spy or whatever, and they sneak up and they choke someone, and then they choke them for 10 seconds and they're dead. They just die.
yeah,
And I'm like, they drop to the ground. I'm like, they're about to wake up again. They're going to wake up and they're going to shoot you.
yeah.
But they're dead. And for me, that's like the most. I recently saw something though. Have you seen that show, Hannah?
No, I haven't.
It's like on Netflix. It's about like the little girl. She's like becomes kind of an assassin. Um, there's some good. There's a scene in there where she chokes someone, and then he falls asleep and wakes up. So it's like I was like, yes,
Finally. Yeah.
stuff like that. But I actually think stuff like that, even with everything going on, it's important for people to know that if you strangle someone, they don't die right away. It's obviously very dangerous because if you hold on a strangle for too long, they can die, right? But if you strangle someone for, we all know, everyone who grapples, if you strangle someone for 8 seconds, they pass out, and then if you let go, they wake up, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important for regular people to know that, as opposed, because I think most people, because of movies and TV, they think if you strangle someone for 10 seconds, they will die, like dead.
Yeah,
so.
And that's even when they do use sort of grappling techniques in the movie. There's a lot of flying around and that.
Oh yeah,
and
flying. It's all flying omoplata.
Yeah, and I think this book gives a good perspective on what a more realistic fight would look like.
Yeah, but basically the tough part was trying to write it so that people that don't understand can understand as well. So trying to balance for, again, as I said, a lot of people who are into sci-fi or fantasy might be reading it. And I tried to make it almost like if you read a fantasy book and you learn about a new magic kind of system, and you learn about the different spells and whatever. I tried to do it similar. You learn the different techniques. It's almost like a magic system. With martial arts.
Yeah. You talked about the combat codes having at least 3 parts previously. Now that the second novel is out, and you're probably already working on part 3, but will there be more than 3 parts in this world, or are there going to be more stories, but maybe in the same universe?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. To be honest, I don't know. It's kind of like the way I write. I'm a gardener, so I try not to plan too far ahead because I think it makes me lazy. If I plan too far ahead, it makes me kind of lazy because it's almost like, just like I was saying before, it's almost like in my head says, you already did that, but you haven't done anything. It's like, that's why I think, I forget what I was reading. It's kind of like social media sometimes I think is negative because people say they're going to do something, right? Like, let's say I was going to be like, I'm going to be a professional mixed martial arts fighter. And then you post that on social media and then everyone says, great job, but you haven't done anything yet. So it's kind of like your brain gets those positive feelings and you haven't done anything. So for me, it's similar with, even in my own head, if I think about too much what I'm going to do, it's almost like my brain says, oh, did you already do that? Or did you not? And I'd rather just like kind of not even think about it and just do it.
Do it. Yeah. The Nike approach.
Yeah.
I was wondering, what would you think of a film adaptation of the combat codes?
Yeah, I'm not going to complain. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
I don't think it's pretty far away from that, but if there's any big time movie producers out there, I'm down for it.
Yeah, I hope you're listening, guys. And would you prefer a series or like movie style?
You know what? I actually went to school for film, so I should probably know something about that. I have not used that film degree very much at all, but I don't know. To be honest, I think either one has advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
But it seems like TV series are really big right now. You know, Netflix, and it seems like there's a lot of, especially with quarantine, everyone's at home. I know they're releasing films like on TV now, but I think there's a lot of momentum behind TV series. I like right now TV series just because that's what I've been watching. I don't have that much time to watch TV, to be honest. But you know, that would be cool.
Yeah, it would be awesome. It would really offer something different than what's out there. So
there would have to be a lot of Jiu Jitsu specialists. I know actually that show there's a lot of people that you see like on social media, they're doing I think Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is pretty popular right now amongst celebrities and
Yeah.
athletes. Seems to be a lot more in the mainstream.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see where that's going. And if it would come out, who would you like to see as Seago? I'm not sure if I pronounce it correctly.
Yeah, see, that's how I pronounce it. You know
Yeah,
what's funny though, with the pronunciations is there's the narrated version of Combat Codes. It's on Audible, and the new one actually is coming out on Audible. Should be like anytime, like in the next few days or a week.
cool.
And my narrator, his name is David Sweeney Bear. He's a English guy. He's so good. Um, he asked me the same thing, like when he's narrating the book, how is this name pronounced? Is it Seago? There's so many names and different different, cities and everything.
Right.
And most of the time I had something in my head when I wrote it, but the way he said it sounds so much better. I just said that, you know what, that was not what I thought it was, but your way is better. It sounds better than what I thought.
Yeah. It has to work for audio as well, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. But what name would you think about if they ask you, hey, we're gonna film the book?
Oh, that's
or a
tough
series?
because he's a young kid, right? So I don't know of any. To be
Right.
honest, I don't know. I don't follow actors, or I just haven't watched many movies, or I don't follow a lot of that at all. So I really, to be honest, as far as a young kid, I don't even know any actors.
Yeah,
Do you know
yeah.
any actors that are around like 15, 16 maybe?
No, usually they come out of nowhere, and then that's their big thing to start with.
Right.
When they're,
Th-
yeah.
yeah, I don't. I'm watched this one show I'm watching just now, Hana, which is pretty good. That girl is really good. She's like 15, 16. She does a lot of martial arts, but
Yeah.
Seago is a boy, so
Yeah. Well, it will
she
be
could
really
be
interesting.
Solara, who is becomes in later in the book.
Yeah, it would be nice if you had a say in that though, because you have such a picture probably of him also in your head. You wouldn't want
Right.
that to be a bit distorted. And do you have any idea who would you like to see as Murray?
Yeah, I guess I know more older actors, but I haven't thought about it too much. In my head when I wrote it, I wasn't thinking of actors, but I was thinking kind of like, Randy Couture.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
is he an actor? I guess he was in that one movie, right? He was in that movie that with Sylvester Stallone. I think it's like a series where was I forget what it was called, but it was like a bunch of it was they pretty much put like all the different action stars in one movie.
Oh,
It
the
was like Stallone
Expendables,
and
right?
yes, I think
Yeah.
wasn't Randy Couture in that?
I think in part 2 or 3, like there's a whole series of them. Yeah.
Right, so we'll bring
I think
him
so.
back.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. We have a little bit of a Shark Tank, so some quick questions, and
Sure.
you can say A or B or just a short answer, or you can also give a long answer, of course. But just
Okay.
the first thing that pops in your mind. Favorite book
Um,
besides the
that's so
combat codes?
I really like this book called Musashi. Highly recommend. It's by Eiji Yoshikawa. It's not the Book of Five Rings. It's not a philosophy book. It's a fiction about Musashi, the samurai. It's like a movie. He goes, through the countryside, and it follows him from when he's a young kid, and he's kind of undeveloped as a samurai, all the way to when he's like becomes a legend. But it reads like a fantasy book pretty much.
Cool.
I highly recommend it. Super good.
Sounds good. Favorite writer?
My favorite writer, I go through a lot of different phases of who my favorite writer is. That's a pretty tough one. I like a lot of them. I would say I don't my favorite writer. Well, you know what? When I was a kid, I read so many books by this one author, and I don't read him anymore, but I do want to give him some credit for kind of developing who I becoming a writer myself. His name is R.A. Salvatore. I wouldn't say right now he's my favorite writer, but for many years he was. He writes fantasy books. they're a little bit pulpy, but they're awesome. His name is R.A. Salvatore.
Cool. Favorite submission?
Omoplata.
Cool. Yeah, we just did an interview with the omoplata man. Don't know if you know him, Bradley Hill. But yeah,
Oh yeah,
great technique.
People think it's a sweep, and it is, but it's such a cool submission when it can be done.
Yeah. Coaching or fighting?
Oh, definitely coaching.
What's your favorite competitor or jiu-jitsu fighter?
I really like Clark. I follow Clark Gracie a lot because of omoplatas. I have a lot of. I like a lot of. I think Marcelo is great. I like when fighters are good on and off the mat. To be honest,
like good people.
I can value their skill no matter what, but I like it when they're good fighters, and then also they have a good character off the mat.
Yeah. What's your favorite gi? Kimono.
Oh, favorite gi. I have a really, really old Keiko Raka gi, and the collar is like a brick. I don't know if you've seen these old school. It's almost like a judo gi. I've had it for like 10 years. It's lasted. The collar is like, I think it's illegal. You can't compete with it because the collar is so thick. That's how they used to make them.
Yeah.
And I don't wear it that often. Every once in a while, I'll break it out.
Just to destroy your opponent.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't hear a lot from Keiko anymore.
Yeah, I think they're mainly overseas. I don't know if they're still around, but this like gi is old. 10 years.
Yeah. What's the number one thing on your bucket list?
Oh, bucket list. You know what? I need to travel. I mean, I used to be really into travel, and I have kids now, young kids, so it's hard to travel. So I want to bring them all around the world, like not even one specific place. I would like them. I have family in Southeast Asia, and they've never been there. So I think bringing them to Vietnam that's where I still have a grandmother that lives in Vietnam. So cool. That would definitely be it. When they're old enough, because it's tough to go that far with little kids, you know. So when they're old enough, bringing them to Vietnam, I think would be the number one on that bucket list.
Yeah. That might be a whole topic for another book. That kind of journey. What's your favorite sport outside of martial arts?
I used to be because I'm from Boston and this is a big sports city. I used to follow a lot of sports. Baseball, football, basketball. People are really big into sports out here. To be honest though, I just stopped. Like maybe 10 years ago, I just stopped. It was too much information. Like it's too much information to follow all the different players. And then I just started only following mixed martial arts and grappling.
Yeah. So that's almost full time if you want to follow all those.
As far as sports that I watch, I pretty much only watch. I don't even have time to watch like UFC anymore. I don't even know who the big fighters are anymore. I used to be a big fan. I kind of follow grappling more now, just grappling. And I like playing tennis. Tennis is fun. Ping pong, like racket sports. I like some of those.
Yeah.
Just have fun.
Nice. Last question. When will part 3 of the combat codes be released?
I wish I could tell you. I'm digging into it, but hopefully by next year sometime. I would hope.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to write a standalone book as well, just to break things up a little. I like writing combat codes a lot, but sometimes I think I need a little break from the world so that I can refresh myself and be able to put my write well for the combat codes. I don't want to, if I'm not having fun doing it, I don't think it'll come out well as well.
Is that in parallel? Like you write one day this, one day that, or is it really like a period that you switch?
It's usually like a few weeks one and then a few weeks the other.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I think people that haven't read the book yet have gotten a really nice introduction to it, and for people that already did, it's really nice to learn more about the writer behind the story. Where would you recommend people going if they wanna, or maybe what's your preference for people? Should they do the audiobook or the written book? What do you think is better, or is it just a matter of preference?
That really depends on their own. If I think some people switch between, but a lot of people I know like audiobooks more because they listen to it in the car or while they're doing something else. And then I know some people are more readers. So again, the audiobook is already out for book 1. So if you're an audiobook listener, I think the narrator did a really good job. He did it justice. And then the second book, the audiobook, should be out fairly soon. And then, yeah, of course, it's available on Amazon paperback, either Kindle e-reader or paperback. So I really think that's a preference of what you as a reader like to do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Where can people follow you?
I'm
Social media.
Yes. Don't follow me. I'm on Instagram. It's Combat Codes on Instagram, @CombatCodes, and then Twitter. Although I don't really go on Twitter. Twitter scares me a little bit. I try to stay off Twitter.
Yeah. Don't get any weird discussions.
Well, it's just everything. To be honest, everything on social media is so negative nowadays. It's tough.
Yeah.
I personally, I'm glad to respond to people and talk about dorky things like Jiu Jitsu and fantasy and sci-fi. But I try to stay off it a bit. But my Instagram handle is @CombatCodes, and I think that's the same for everything.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put a link down in the description also.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for your time and letting us into the world behind the story a little bit. I really appreciate your taking the time for that.
Thanks, Micha. I appreciate you having me on.
Great. Everybody watching, also thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And make sure to check out the book. It's definitely recommended. And well, Alex, thank you again and wish you a really nice day.
Okay, you too, Micha. Have a good one. Thank you.
Take care.